It's now my distinct pleasure to welcome our featured speaker, Larry Harding. Larry Harding is Vice Chairman and Executive Director at Radius, a global company that helps businesses expand overseas. With over 20 years of international expansion and operating experience, Larry has become an expert in helping companies and nonprofit organizations know when, where, and how to expand their businesses internationally. With that, I'd like to hand the floor over to Larry Harding. Larry, the floor is yours. Please take it away.
So the focus of the webinar today really is around the budgeting elements, the different costs and things to be mindful of when finance folks are supporting a business that is operating overseas already or planning to go overseas maybe for the first time. So no surprise here for the group on the call, but when operating overseas, pulling together a good budget, identifying all of the known costs and as many of the hidden costs as possible, pulling together excellent cost-benefit returns really is a top priority for the role that we play in helping our organizations expand and win globally. So, somewhat obvious here, there are really three reasons why cost estimates at the front end of the project become so important. One of the roles finance plays is justifying whether the decision that the CEO or the board or the head of sales or the head of production, whoever it is, deciding to move your organization overseas, you want to be able to make that decision based on reliable estimates of both the benefit and the costs of doing so. So having a really good handle on the costs becomes an important part of that overall analysis. In addition, if you're looking at potentially different regions to expand to or different countries within those regions, it can be very helpful because the costs can be very different from region to region and country to country. So having a hand on, having your eyes on which different territories make the most sense for your organizations based on the benefits as well as the different costs becomes important. And then lastly, having reliable cost estimates helps you hold the organization accountable for sort of achieving the objectives that you have put out front. Global expansion can represent an oftentimes really significant investment that the organization is making, and it's very important that the organization, top to bottom and sort of A to Z, has the tools necessary to identify if they're succeeding based on the plans and the expectations, or if not, where some different tweaks may need to be made. So one of the sad pieces of news I need to report is the hidden costs and the surprises and the gotchas with global expansion probably rival any other type of project that finance professionals can be involved with within their organization. I'd love to sit here and tell you that if you do a handful of things that we talk about on the webinar today, it's going to be all smooth sailing for you. The reality is there will be hidden costs, there will be surprises, there'll be frustrations, more time-consuming, different challenges. It's always best to know at the front end what you're getting into, though, and we'll touch on a handful of things that are probably going to crop up or have cropped up for many of you who've been involved in similar projects. So there are a handful of budget surprises that seem to come up very, very consistently with the folks that we've worked with. One is the cost of overseas offices. So the reality is if you're taking office space in just about any of the different countries or cities outside of the U.S. Where you are likely to go, it's invariably going to be at least as expensive, if not more expensive, and in many cases much more expensive. So the cost of overseas office is something that you want to really get a handle on at the front end. In addition, some of the basics, different staffing, services, office space, so on, vary significantly not only from region to region and countries within those regions, but different cities and locations within those countries. So identifying where you might choose to be based on some of the different cost expectations can be a very important and helpful part of the role that we play in the project. Different tax and compliance issues vary wildly. Some are sort of expected, others would be highly counterintuitive or just not clear or known. Different tax and compliance requirements in different locations outside of the U.S. Are very significant, and the closer you are able to get to having a handle on what those different issues are, again at the front end, the better the opportunity to minimize surprises. We have a relatively tame FICA and Medicare Social Security type of cost requirement. In almost every country overseas outside of the U.S., the employer social costs can be significantly greater and are something that needs to be really have a good handle on, especially during the hiring process. So budgeting alone doesn't create success or failure. It would be nice if it did, and then we'd all do great budgets and ensure success. But what it does do, and that's in the interest of all of us from the finance professional side, it minimizes the risks of unpleasant surprises, which is a big win. So one of the things I thought might be helpful would be to touch on some of the different costs and hidden costs and surprise elements in a handful of the higher profile countries and regions around the world, Europe, Latin America, and Asia.